We'll go ahead and get started. So hello, everyone. My name is Lark Meadow, and I'm the CEO of Aeon Blue, and I am your moderator today. Welcome to the much anticipated event where we talk about the commercial side of eFuels and the hydrogen industry and how to make projects truly financeable. What really kicked this webinar off is that Aeon Blue received a grant from the state of New Mexico, and the DOE conducted a third-party assessment of our techno-economics. We had an initial webinar that dove into the technical aspects of the report, and now we are focusing on the financial findings and how co-products and hybrid technologies truly increase a project's success rate, what that infrastructure will look like in the future of clean fuels. The talks will be about 5 minutes each. We have incredible experts on commercial deployment for hydrogen, e-fuels in the overall chemical sector, who will be sharing their unique perspectives on how integrating and valorizing the hydrogen process is how you get to cost parity with fossil, and how important supply chain infrastructure is for industry to get to scale. So you'll want to pop all of your questions into the chat. And our admin, Lori Bowen, she's our Chief Admin Officer. She'll be delivering them to me, and I will be asking the panelists your questions. After the panel presents, then we're going to turn it over and get those questions answered. We'd like to thank Clemens Behrend for co-hosting us today. Clemens, we appreciate all the support that you have given to us to make our events happen. Do make sure to follow Clemens to learn about future events, and the work that he's really doing in hydrogen is pretty incredible. Okay, so let's get started. So first up, we have Yoshi Okarni. Yoshi is Aeon Blue's Chief Science Officer. He's an electrochemist and renewable energy scientist who has spent over 3 decades in synthetic fuels and renewable energy. And he's the inventor behind Aeon Blue's seawater to fuels technology. He's a major proponent for producing multiple products in a single process to improve profit margins and carbon impact. And he will share some key points from the report that I was referring to from Los Alamos National Labs, as well as our hybrid platform technology. We can dive into that a bit. So, Doc, go ahead and take it away.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction, Lark. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on from whence you are tuning in, and thanks for joining us. So yeah, we're going to unpack the financial implications of the LANL report. Previously on Aeon Blue's techno-economics, and translate those key findings into language that decision makers and investors and community leaders can actually use. Previously, we did hold a webinar discussing the technical implications, and please feel free to contact us for a recording of that webinar if you're interested. The grant was for the purpose of putting Aeon Blue's technology under the microscope by the world's greatest topic experts who would have no vested interest or prior knowledge of Aeon Blue or its team. So we worked with William Kubik at Los Alamos National Lab, who at the time was unknown to me, and he and I worked together for about 3 months to communicate the technology and establish the baselines for the assessment, after which Bill told me, go away, don't call me, I'll call you, so that his further assessment would not be influenced by me or by Aeon Blue. He called me about 9 months later and said that he had the report, and it took a draft. It took another 6 months or so to get it finalized with US DOE and LANL and state of New Mexico. And this is the report that we're discussing. Rather than dig into the nitty-gritty details, which would fill many hours and days to unpack, let's let some experts in the field do that. And we can go to key findings, which I think speak for themselves. So, number one here is really loud. It confirms Aeon Blue's finding that we can produce e-fuel at cost parity with natural gas at the wellhead. So that's unsubsidized, unsupported cost of production, not price, but cost. And that the key to being able to do that is the profitability of co-products. And I'll get to that in just a second. So we need not sell, in fact, all of the co-products. We need only sell a portion of those co-products, and we can sell those co-products at a discount to the existing market so that we can achieve an IRR that's attractive by changing 0.5% or so of one product. For instance, we can increase from 10 to 15% IRR, and if we increase another 0.5% or 5%, we can reach, numbers of 15 to 20% internal rate of return. This is really based entirely on what we call the first, second, third wave of DAC and hydrogen. So we like to break DAC and CCUS and hydrogen, which, as you all know, and can see in the report, are really just different sides of the same coin, or maybe different sides of the same die, since there's so many, or maybe the same side of different dice. Anyway, we break them down into waves. The first wave is essentially asking the question, can we do it? Can this be done? It's a science experiment, a commercial one, but still exploratory. Is the technology of making hydrogen, is the technology of capturing carbon dioxide actually doable? And if so, how? So we answer that question. And then we find, of course, that it doesn't make any money. So then the second wave is where we come in. Now that we know it can be done technically, we realize we need to turn a dollar or a pound or a euro or a yuan. And so we see a number of companies in this second wave, and virtually all of them are DAC plus hydrogen. So it's the same for hydrogen. Hydrogen realizes that we need something in addition to just production of hydrogen, and that choice in Europe so far, 100% of the hydrogen tenders have been from chlor-alkali. Now, neither of those are the whole story, but once we've figured that out, we need to integrate them and seek out all the efficiencies we can for the whole system. Namely, we need to monetize the non-energetic co-products, integrate heating and cooling, become part of a larger system that's already pumping air, and so on. So, of course, chlor-alkali is there, and it's the obvious choice, being 25,000 times larger than all other electrolysis on the Earth combined, including aluminium, which is a very distant second. But you have to solve the interruptibility and the chlorine problem. So we did. And we talked about this in our previous webinar. And now on to the economic repercussions of having solved that. Chlor-alkali is already a self-supporting industry. It is already a technological approach that pays its own bills and produces green hydrogen. There are some technical aspects that are problems with that, but it is already a ready-made solution for the eFuels path. Now, there are a few others on the right path. Aeon Blue is not alone in this leg of the race, in the third wave DAC, third wave hydrogen, third wave eFuels. But DAC has, or Aeon Blue has some specific advantages, Perlanal. IP and in interruptibility and solving the chlorine problem. These are otherwise TRL9 technologies. Aeon Blue's IP brings it down to about TRL5, but we're in the process right now this year in 2026 of deploying our pilot, our first pilot, to bring us up to a higher TRL7 or so. That's what I have to say about this portion, my introduction. I'll answer questions from the chat during my time, and right now I'll turn it over to the next in line.
Okay, thanks, Doc. And for anyone who's interested in the report by Lannel, we have posted an abridged version on our LinkedIn page, and I believe Lori is posting that into the chat if she hasn't already. Okay, so next up is Micah Outhouse, Vice President of Government Relations and Public Affairs at the Canadian Hydrogen Association. Micah has spent 15 years in advancing Canada's clean tech sector. She secured $30 million in provincial hydrogen funding, and her advocacy directly contributes to 3 major federal tax incentives that are now supporting clean tech deployment across the country. It's very exciting. Micah, it's exciting to see the work that's being done here in Canada. Looking forward to hearing your talk.
Thank you so much, Lark, and thank you so much for inviting me to this webinar. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be. I'll say a few words about the Canadian Hydrogen Association and our work here, and the challenges the sector is facing generally, and happy to have a discussion then as to how Aeon Blue or Aeon Blue's technology can solve some of these challenges. All right. I hope, yeah, you can see my screen, but I can't advance the slides myself, I believe. All right. Yeah, so first of all, we have currently about 200 members across Canada, really spanning the entire hydrogen value chain from production to transportation and storage to end use. As you can see on the slide, there are some bigger players. So the Air Liquides of this world, for example, the Enbridges, the Siemens, but also players in the SME segment, and then more innovative startups that are challenging the status quo, such as Aeon Blue. Okay, next slide. So we currently have 3 affiliates across the country, 1 in BC, 1 in Alberta, and 1 in Ontario, where I'm based. I'm in Toronto. And we also just signed MOUs with Hydrogène Québec and the Atlantic Hydrogen Alliance, and we're working very closely together to make sure we're really spanning the entire country and, more importantly, singing from the same song sheet. Next slide. Yeah, so a few more words on who we are, who's the team. So we're small but mighty, I might say. We have our president and CEO, David Bilodeau, my colleague, Nicholas Hilario, who's taking care of operations and membership engagement. He's based in BC. David is based in Nova Scotia, and our finance director, Everly Opilia. Our key mandate is really, at the end of the day, to accelerate the adoption of our members' products and services. And we do that by 1, advocacy, 2, facilitating collaborations across different, between different players, both across Canada, but also globally. And I think you can go to the next slide that will show that. That's right. And then the 3rd pillar is knowledge sharing. So market and regulatory research and reports, intelligence, information with regards to funding programs, etc. But I would also like to highlight that the focus is clearly advocacy for us, so government relations, as if we don't have the right regulations and policies in place, at this point, it won't be possible to have a market. So this is very important to shape the right conditions for hydrogen to take off. And I believe that it was the last slide. Oh, yeah, sectors challenges. Yes, that's important. So, of course, at the moment, the hydrogen sector is facing high capital and operational costs. And again, it depends a bit on where you are. That holds true particularly for low carbon hydrogen produced via electrolysis. So the price of electricity is a decisive factor here. But we're also, of course, seeing new cost-effective production pathway, for example, methane pyrolysis. They're not quite there, but I believe once these technologies take off, that might be a bit of a game changer as well. Currently, the dominant method, and I believe that is globally the case, is hydrogen production through steam methane reforming, which is relatively cost effective, but of course highly carbon intensive. And then combining it with carbon capture and storage is of course a solution to reduce emissions. But again, this requires high capital investment. And then another nut to crack is, of course, the storage and transportation of hydrogen, especially when we're talking of transporting hydrogen across the Atlantic. And I know there have been conversations about converting hydrogen to carriers like ammonia. And recently, I think the focus is more, at least on the European side, on methane, but all this still remains to be solved. And then, of course, that comes potentially with a different set of issues when converting hydrogen to ammonia and then converting it back. Does it make sense? Under which conditions, etc.? And then we, at the moment at least, we still face a bit of a hen-egg situation. Production versus offtake. So hydrogen producers, of course, need to know there's enough offtake and vice versa. And the European Union is tackling that in a very intelligent way by using double-sided auctions. But of course, this is also still a bit in the infancy stage. And then the other challenge, I guess, we're facing across the board, but specifically here in Canada is a lack of infrastructure, specifically if we're talking about the use of low carbon hydrogen in transit and heavy duty transportation. We need the refueling infrastructure that goes with it, etc. So just to give you a bit of an overview of what we're up against, I'm optimistic. Otherwise, I would probably be wrong for my job. And I believe we can do that. And I obviously believe in the benefits of low carbon hydrogen and its future. And maybe I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Micah. Appreciate your insight. So next up, we have Reinier Grimbergen. He's joining us from the Netherlands. Reinier is an organic chemist by training and obtained his PhD in solid state chemistry at the Radboud University in Nijmegen. After his studies, he joined Royal DSM, a life science and material science company, and made his career in R&D and innovation management with a focus on sustainable value creation. After having joined Boleus Group, Reinier has moved to TNO, where he was appointed as a principal consultant of industrial transformation. Currently, he is CTO and co-founder at Blue Circle Olefins, a startup focusing on the production and commercialization of circular olefins in Europe. Reinier, great to have you on today.
Yeah, thanks, Lark, for having me. Happy to contribute to this webinar. Like you said, I'm Reinier Grimbergen. I'm the CTO of Blue Circle Olefins. And the first thing is maybe to introduce Blue Circle Olefins. If you look next to me, you see a tree. And this tree is basically saying what we are doing. We are replacing fossil inputs to produce chemicals by basically waste. And the way we do this is that we have a project in the Netherlands where we want to build in Rotterdam a 200 kilotons production facility, which turns methanol, renewable methanol actually, into renewable olefins, being ethylene and propylene. And ethylene and propylene, like in this tree, are the basic building blocks of more than 60% of all chemicals that we all use and every day actually around us. So the line of thinking is, if we replace the stem of the tree, the entire tree will become green, and this tree is the complexity of the chemical industry. So we changed basically steam cracking of naphtha into turning renewable methanol produced from waste. It can be municipal solid waste gasification, can be by biomass gasification, or it can be e-methanol, which is, I think, the topic for today. And we can turn that into ethylene and propylene and feed that to all the downstream production that we have in Europe, in the ARA cluster, in the Netherlands, in Belgium, and in Germany, which is connected by pipes. And we can supply all these plants basically with circular instead of fossil feedstocks. Why is that important? If you look today to the geopolitical situation in the world, I think it's clear that Europe has kind of is kind of short in its own fossil resources like oil and gas, and that's why we have to import a lot. And that is to us not a level playing field anymore, because like solar, by the way, and wind is also not evenly distributed along the globe. Also, oil and gas reserves are also not evenly distributed. So for Europe, it's important to come to a level playing field again. And we see that there's an opportunity in turning basically our waste again into virgin products. And that is what we are doing with this, with our company, Blue Circle Olefins. I think for today, maybe to bridge for today to basically the Aeon technology that we will discuss, and what Doc already introduced. In the current structure, you see e-methane being produced, but I think we all know if you can produce e-methane, you could also produce e-methanol, and that would be the link to our business. So what we see in the future, there's a huge need for circular carbon, like I said, from waste, bio waste, or from the air. And I think the route that we discussed today, which is a co-valorization, making, let's say, CO2 capturing, as well as production of fuel like e-methanol, or a feedstock in our case, e-methanol to produce e-chemicals, if you like, is actually the link. So I'm happy to be here and answer any questions that might pop up during the session.
Thanks so much, Rainier. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Okay, so now we have Jeff Benesh from Austin, Texas, currently Chief Operating Officer at TopTal and formerly COO at Zero Petroleum, where he led project development and technology commercialization in eFuels. Jeff brings over 20 years of executive experience across technology, energy, and strategy consulting, including leadership roles at Amazon Web Services, Alix Partners, HP, and McKinsey. He has a deep understanding of scaling emerging technologies into billion-dollar businesses and managing for profitability. So thank you so much for being here, Jeff. Feel free to take it away whenever you're ready.
Thanks so much, Lark and Yoshi. Appreciate being able to talk about this with you all today. When I've been looking at eFuels projects, I've had the privilege of being able to talk to dozens upon dozens of different project developers. I've been able to talk to different feedstock suppliers across the value chain. And I've also been able to talk to a lot of municipal governments about what they're looking for as they are trying to build these industries. Across all of these different parties, there are several really specific items which come up, which are common themes independent of any of the underlying technologies. when we start to talk about e-fuels, we have to start to look for 4 main feedstocks to figure out how to do it. First, it's electricity. That electricity is electricity which we want to be renewable in basis. We want that to be additive to the grid to support general electrification. We want it also to make sense in terms of being at a similar time of year. 2, we need hydrogen. There's a lot of ways to get hydrogen into an e-fuel site, but really when we're talking about e-fuels, we want that hydrogen to come from a non-fossil source because there are other perfectly good ways to get hydrogen from methane to actually produce, hydrogen by itself. But that's not what we're interested in. We're interested in hydrogen that is actually renewable in basis. Third, carbon dioxide. Again, similar to hydrogen, I almost wish that we actually had applied the color scale to carbon dioxide as much as we had applied it to hydrogen, because there's also a lot of different flavors of carbon dioxide. And we actually, at the end of the day, to make e-fuels, we want to use carbon dioxide that we are recapturing from the atmosphere rather than saying that we are dependent upon a fossil source of carbon dioxide. And fourth is water. Now, the interesting thing here is that water doesn't get nearly the amount of attention from discussions of decarbonization policy. But when you actually go to the side of trying to build a plant, water is absolutely critical, and water is one of the first things that we ask about when we're evaluating a site. When we think about building a plant, any kind of chemical plant, any kind of steel plant, any kind of process plant, a data center, and don't forget the data centers, we are looking at water that's critical for cooling and heating. We're looking at water for process stock. Something that people don't necessarily understand is that a lot of the computers and data centers now are actually water cooled directly on the chips. Semiconductor plants need that water. And then finally, we also need a lot of water to help treat the waste products before disposal of those waste products. So water is absolutely critical to building a modern industrial base. Now, water is also starting to get some attention. We start to talk about things like high water stress. The thing that immediately pops to mind is desert regions. And that's true. And frankly, desert regions have great solar potential. So if you could come up with a way of getting good processed water in a desert region paired with solar, that actually becomes a great e-fuel site. But there are also lots of other areas that are close to the ocean and have less fresh water. One of my personal favorites, Cabo San Lucas, heavily dependent on desalination plants to support local tourism and industry. These issues are spread across the world, whether you look at places like Southern California, the Gulf countries, Equatorial Africa, Australia. Water is actually really a key enabler of industrial growth beyond its usage in e-fuels itself. Many people in the US, if you're thinking about this and you've been paying attention to what's going on, even in the home of energy, Corpus Christi, the local manufacturing base is actually seeing shortages in processed water and have been embarking on a multi-year, very contentious effort to try to figure out how to build a multi-$100 million desalination plant to support local industry. This is everywhere. The other part of this is also many regions want to protect agriculture for food resiliency. And so again, it comes back to water availability. Now I'm talking about water a lot because when we talk about e-fuels, there's a lot more to talk about in terms of how we actually come up with a profitable e-fuels model. And Lori, can I ask you to share the slide now? So when I was looking at the report, I'm a former management consultant being used to being asked by private equity sponsors to take apart the model and tell them what I see in the model and really compare this to best practices or benchmarks and see what this is. So this is something I did myself. I got the Lanol report and basically worked backwards from the mass energy balances. And at the end of the day, what this is about, and what you hear a lot about in energy and green hydrogen, is it's about energy driving the e-fuel costs. For Aeon Blue, what I saw is it's actually the useful side products which create the e-fuel profitability breakthrough. And this is just basically using a standard call of an allocation method in terms of looking at the four main streams of products which can come out of the Aeon Blue process. So first, I basically normalize this against making 1 ton of e-fuel, just as a reference point. But then what you see is, how do you actually allocate the energy to the other useful side products in a way that helps you deliver insight as to what the energy advantage of Aeon Blue is? So when I look at this chart, I'll actually start going left to right here. Aeon Blue is actually pretty good at making water. And for every 1 ton of e-fuel, Aeon Blue makes about 650 tons of water. And this water can be of multiple grades, including laboratory grade and distilled industrial grade, which are actually even much higher standards than that's what's needed for municipal usage or agriculture. So just saying, it's actually very good, and just say, hey, look, you can even just say that it's a very, very good H2 purification process and uses, about 30% less energy allocated to the water portion versus what a conventional process would be. On the oxidizer side, again, oxidizers are really important. There's about 100 million metric tons per year of oxidizers used right now with good availability. That usage market could be even greater. And there's also already a green challenge for oxidizers, which is current chlor-alkali plants are actually typically very dependent on fossil energy sources for their energy. So there's actually a coming challenge to actually figure out how you actually decarbonize the footprint of the chlor-alkali plants themselves. But what we see here is just applying again, pretty simple energy allocation to the oxidizers and saying, let's just say that we're allocating as much energy to producing those oxidizers as a very, very, very good plant that uses about 75% of the norm. Okay, so then we look at what's left. What's left that we actually get from Aeon Blue is actually the really interesting high value part towards decarbonization of additional parts of industry. So first, let's talk about CCUS. So compared to conventional DAC processes that are low carbon, so if you think about some air exchange based DAC, to produce about 8 tons of CO2 for additional CCUS usage, whether that's sequestration or incorporation into another product, the energy need that can be allocated against that is about 85% less using the Aeon Blue process. So that's actually a dramatic improvement in terms of the energy requirement to actually make a ton of useful green CO2. And this is scaled towards making about 8 tons of CO2. It's just kind of an allocation that's normalized to that 1 ton of e-fuel. And then finally, when we look at the e-fuel, currently most major processes to make e-fuel, they'll use somewhere quoted between about 28 to 37 megawatt hours of e-fuel, of 28 to 37 megawatt hours of energy to make 1 ton of e-fuel. Based on what's left from this process, this is saying that we can effectively make e-fuel where we only have to allocate about 14.6 megawatt hours of energy to that. So we can reduce that energy load against the e-fuel cost by over 55%. This is a major, major advantage of saying that we can make e-fuel with less than half of the energy cost input compared to the other products. And in that same plant, we are also creating very high value additional products like purified water, green oxidizer, and green carbon dioxide. Now, I am not as much of the process expert in terms of chemical processes as many others I have seen, and as who built the Lannel report. But what I can see from building the plants is really clear, which is energy optimization is really well known in plant design. It's already actively planned to say, how do you actually recapture all the energy and drive it towards useful products? This is fundamental in oil refining and chemical plants. Now, when you commonly approach this in DAC plants and other e-molecule plants around the world, what's typically tried is to actually recapture this excess energy through bolt-on systems. You'll try to redeploy that excess heat from the FT process using steam between areas of the plant, or you use a Rankine cycle generator to generate electricity. Anytime you're doing, call it, some of these outside thermal transfers, there's significant losses of the valuable heat before it ever gets used. One of the little thermodynamic tricks inside of the Aeon Blue system, from what I've been able to read through and learn, is that frankly, because all of these products are coming out of the same medium, which is basically water, and starting with a brine water, there's extremely good conservation of energy towards the desired and saleable end products. So this is where I've been able to take it apart, and from my side, start to really believe in the brine alkali pathway, and specifically seeing some of the advantages that Yoshi and team have been able to put together, as to say there really is something very real here in terms of going back to the fundamentals of tracing the energy through the path and seeing where it's used and saying, yes, indeed, you can actually make 1 ton of e-fuel with less energy versus other plants trying to make that e-fuel. And so to me, this shows that potential of Aeon Blue. And then I'm excited to see what the team puts together from this to take this to market. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Yeah, the graph that you showed really demonstrates how Aeon Blue's technology, reduces the energy load and adds value through the entire product line beyond eFuels. So appreciate you sharing that. Okay, so it looks like we have a few questions from our audience. All right, so we'll start with Andrew Moore's question. So how does Aeon Blue make water? Doc, would you be able to explain that in a few minutes?
Yeah, I'll go very quickly. So we use an MVR MEE system to up concentrate the brine. At its core, this is just to say that acronym, it's a mechanical vapor recompression multi-effect evaporation system. It's a very, very robust system, very well developed. There are a couple of reasons that we need it and a couple of reasons that it works particularly well. One of the reasons that we need it is because the electrolysis that we do is actually based on the current carrying capacity of brine. That is, we need at least a 13-14% by weight, ionic weight solution of brine in order for us to be able to carry a current. We use a pumped flow electrolyzer, so that way we don't need the salt saturated solution. We can do subsaturation, which has additional advantages. But most brines in the world are not available at 13, 14, 20, 26%. Most brines available in the world are, in fact, seawater. It covers 3/4 of our planet. And so in order to do that, we need to extract water and up concentrate the salts that are already there. We use MVR specifically because it is two things. One is it is by design able to use waste heat. And so this is one of the ways in which we can use waste heat of the system. An unavoidable fact of doing industry is waste heat. How do you valorize that waste heat? MVR MEE is a great choice. So that allows us to improve the overall efficiency of the system. The second reason why we use MVR MEE is that it is robust. It is fixed with a welding torch and a ball peen hammer. It is not a consumer of extremely sensitive membranes or a producer of waste resins, which is one of the problems that impact a lot of ion exchange and RO systems. If you look at RO systems on seawater, these have been pioneered throughout the world in Caracas and in Corpus Christi, where they've used RO, and El Paso, Texas, where they've used RO to extract, to concentrate the salts, to extract the water, and those membranes fail extremely rapidly. Using MVR MEE allows us an extremely robust system that is unlikely to fail. When it does, a couple of blue-collar workers can fix it in an hour with a welding torch. This is really the path that you need to get to that water. It's very important that if it is so sensitive that it breaks in the field, then you might as well not have it. The cost of maintenance is so high that the cost of operation is irrelevant. And an advantage, one of the many advantages, is that that water produced from MVR-MEE is ultra pure. You're talking about conductivities that are 5 to 15 megaohm centimeters, and of course with a few extra steps involved with an additional MEE, an additional effect evaporator, you can achieve 18 megaohm centimeter water, which is critical to hydrogen, it's critical to semiconductors, critical to battery, it's critical to cosmetics, and there's an extremely high global demand for that kind of water.
Doc, appreciate it. So I got a question from Micah. So as someone who has been navigating clean tech businesses, how does revenue diversification really change the risk profile for investors and project partners? What have you seen?
Yeah. So it's maybe I want to rewind the tape here a little bit. So I actually noticed I omitted one of my slides, which was what's the solution actually to overcome some of these challenges I highlighted. And one are policy-driven solutions. So that could be policy levers driving cost-effective production or incentivizing adoption. And there are others too. Second thing is process economics. So byproducts that can be monetized and process efficiency and new or improved technologies. And I feel like Aeon Blue kind of checks all of these boxes. So you have a range that can be monetized. You have process efficiency, as Yoshi just highlighted, just with the water production. But there are, of course, other steps, and all are proven technologies. And then, yeah, but I think, to me, really the key driver, and I see this with other completely different technologies as well, whenever you have a byproduct, you produce something else other than low carbon hydrogen, that is of great advantage. And then I still want to touch economies of scale, because that's important. I feel, because the naysayers go like, well, low carbon hydrogen will never work without incentives. And my perspective is that we may need some of the incentives upfront until the industry reach scale. But again, Aeon Blue's case is a different one.
In your work, have you seen, what have you seen in terms of the companies that are in the process of scaling their technologies, maybe early stage or at the commercialization stage? What have you been seeing in terms of hydrogen technologies? Are you seeing hybrid? Are you seeing just companies that are really being creative and mixing these kinds of different elements and incentives in so that they can get to scale? What are your thoughts?
Yep. So I feel like, to me, pyrolysis is very promising. The challenge you have, for example, compared to Aeon Blue's technologies, is it's a novel technology. So again, for risk-averse investors, that it is an issue. Whereas with Aeon Blue, you deal with process steps that are all based on proven technology, right? So the risk profile relatively low. Then you also have the products there is a market. It's not debatable, is there a new market or not? No, there is a market, it's needed. And so that's a very strong case. I had a third point that slipped my mind right now, but I think I touched on the important things here.
Okay.
The other thing is, again, but that kind of relates to the perceived risk in novel technologies. Of course, if and when you can demonstrate that you have a proven technology, your capital costs will be cheaper as well, which of course plays a big role.
Yeah, yeah. I believe that I could probably talk to you about this for the next hour, especially the ecosystem in Canada. I will. So thank you so much. I'll make sure that I don't capitalize everybody's time. But okay, so I do have a question for Rainier. This is from the audience. So excellent panel. This is from Cesar Patino. He says, in the roots of the tree and under the concept of subsurface resources. So you got geologic hydrogen, you got CO2, you got helium. Will this feedstock be taken account into your future projects? Like, what's your plan? I think there's a general interest on where you're going with this.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question. Now, in fact, what we do is build a facility that converts methanol that can come from different sources and convert it into what we call circular olefins. That's the base. And then if you go upstream and you look to where is the carbon source coming from, then it should be a non-fossil carbon source. And then indeed, and I think you show here a very interesting process. It's all about cost and efficiency again. So how do you get access to the lowest cost, lowest and low footprint methanol in our case, which contains non-fossil carbon? That is critical because that brings us to emission reductions over the complete life cycle of, for instance, plastics, polyolefins like polypropylene, polyethylene, of more than 80% emission reduction. And I think even if you look to certain co-products, then it could really go to zero. And I think the ambition of the chemical industry, which is contributing substantially to global heating, is to go to net zero and circular. And in fact, you combine in this concept the two. You basically substitute fossil carbon by circular carbon, bringing in the circularity. And at the same time, you bring in a kind of a net zero emission scheme. And that's the power of this. And if I may elaborate, what I liked in the previous remark is proven technology. You know, I'm a chemist. I worked for the chemical industry for 30 years. To bring a new process with new technology, like first of a kind of the different process steps, to the real skill you need. And the chemical industry, the key rule is go big or go home. You need the economy of scale. Well, if you know that bringing something from TRL 5 to really the million ton I'm now talking about, to 9 to really commercially proven, that easily takes 25 years. Well, how can you shortcut that? That's why I like the concept here, is work with proven technologies and combine them in such a way that you get the max of the energy and you get the max of your feedstocks and you valorize them by co-products. And that's another rule from the chemical industry. The integrated clusters that we have in Europe, why could they be competitive despite the fact that we don't have that many fossil resources in Europe, is in fact of this integration. So I think the industrial clusters in Europe actually look a bit like the Aeon process, but then big scale. And I see here a similarity, and that makes me confident that this type of using proven technologies, using scalable technologies, basically brings us also in the time scale to really bring an impact in capitals before 2050, because that's around the corner.
Yes. Thank you, Rainier. Appreciate your perspective. Okay, so we do have some more questions coming in, and we have about 9 minutes left. So we're going to do a little bit of rapid fire here. So Jeff, where do you see the role of e-methane as an e-fuel, both in the supply chain and as a global commodity? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And this actually ties back to what Rainier was actually just speaking to, which is there are very well established supply chains for liquid natural gas, otherwise known as e-methane, as well as for methanol. And one of the advantages of going to methane as an intermediate molecule is you can use it many places. So I actually see that whether you're trying to build an e-fuels facility around methane, you could actually source from an e-molecules process like Aeon Blue. You could source from biogas. You could import from other regions. You can also take it in from methanol versus methane. So I actually see that in many ways, methane becomes a very common trading block as an e-molecule. It's very well established on how to compress it, move it, store it. You can actually move it and store it for months at a time. So basically, if you can't make it into an e-fuel, methane is a lot simpler to handle than a hydrogen, which only has a practical storage period of weeks, sometimes months, and actually has a lot of energy loss from storing it versus methane, which actually has a minimal energy loss from compressing it and storing it.
Now, do you think that methane is an improvement over syngas?
Yeah, we start to get into a little bit of a definitional thing, and what is that syngas? Syngas also often includes saying you've got the carbon monoxide there, and carbon monoxide is a very, very, very short-term molecule. You really don't want to have any carbon monoxide stored at all, and so you want to be able to use that basically immediately in process. So there is intense advantage to basically getting from your hydrogen and your carbon source into another stable molecule. Whether that stable molecule is your end product, like eSAF, or whether that stable end molecule is e-methanol or e-methane. Those are actually much safer to store and handle.
Yeah.
One comment that I would make out of turn is that while the Lannel report does address e-methane, e-methanol is functionally identical from a process perspective. Yeah. So choosing to go to e-methane or to e-methanol on Aeon Blue's part is substantively irrelevant.
Yeah, and if I may add from a European perspective, also our strategy, a methanol to olefins facility needs to be at the place where you have all your other downstream industry, whereas shipping methanol around the globe does not add to your business case. It's dirt cheap because it's just liquid at room temperature and normal pressure. LNG or SNG shipping is cryogenic. That's more, from a European perspective, more expensive. So, and that is maybe my final point I want to make here is that I think you have a modular kind of scheme that you will adjust on where you are on the planet, right? So you can, if you need water, it's different. I mean, in the Netherlands, we have a lot of water, so there's a bit of different business model. So, but if you indeed are in desert regions or where there's water scarcity, then it's of fantastic value creation that you do. But and you can also hold the same thing for the other puzzle pieces in your diagram, that you can adjust this as a kind of modular system, depending on where you can create the most value with in the region that you install it. And I think that's also an elegant approach.
Thank you, Rainier. Appreciate that. Okay, so Doc, we do have a few questions that you have 5 minutes to get through. So yeah, gonna get started. So from Paul Harrington, for every gallon of brine water extracted from the ocean, or let's say we're going underground, getting, basically accessing the brine layer. How much will become ultra pure water?
Yeah. So it really depends on the brine source, and each brine source will give you a different answer. For seawater, it is 5 liters, let's roughly speaking, 5 liters of input seawater, and you're going to get out 4 liters of ultra pure and 1 liter of electrolyte, which then goes into the eFuel process. There's some water recycling and so on and so forth, so those numbers are approximate, but that's about right. 5 liters in, 4 go to ultra pure water, and 1 goes to consumption. The 4 liters that go to ultra pure can also be back mixed, and so that number can be 4 of 18 megohm centimeter, but you may be looking at a larger number, say 10, if you're looking for drinking water.
Thanks, Doc. Okay, so Malad Zamani says, thanks for the great panel discussion. 2 questions. Okay, so number 1, is the carbon in your products, in your byproducts, in the form of CO2 or solid carbon?
I'm sorry, one more time.
Is the carbon in your byproducts in the form of CO2 or solid carbon? I think
so there are no. Yeah, for clarity, the carbon which we capture from the air or the sea or flue gas, it's all the same fundamental chemistry, is entirely in the eFuel or buried. And so there's no carbon in the byproducts, except that the byproducts are generated carbon free, or you say low carbon or carbon neutral. That is, they're made from renewable energy, whereas normally they would have been made from burning fossil fuels. So there's some displacement there, but there's no embedded carbon in water, for instance. There's no embedded carbon in chlorate oxidizers that are used for water treatment and rocket fuel and so forth. There's no carbon in that itself. The carbon is either in the fuel or in the ground.
Okay, great, thanks. And then 2, how would you comment on using your technology at offshore sites? And Jeff might be able to pop in here as well, especially since he was talking about going into the desert.
I love it, but I've spoken enough. So how about Jeff take that one away?
I think that's one of the interesting things here is when you think about the deployment potential for what you're doing. At the end of the day, there is actually a lot. I think one of the interesting things here, when you talk about going offshore, I think the other answer is could you actually use near shore wind in an area where you have pick your island. Could you do this in Hawaii? Absolutely, easily. Brilliant amounts of wind power and solar power and lots of available, ocean water that is readily available. Lots of other island locations around the world, be that the Canaries, the Maldives, across
Cape
the Malaysia, Cape Breton, across the chain. Yeah, this is actually really well suited towards ocean-centric production.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeff. So for everyone who did not get their questions answered, if you do have, if you would like those questions to be answered, if you have any additional questions for the panelists, you can reach them through their LinkedIns. To meet the Aeon Blue team, please do reach out to Yoshi. I call him Doc, so if you're wondering who the character is, whose name is Doc, it's the same person. So you can reach out to him, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, or you can reach out to the team at info@aeonblue.ca. Thank you all so much. Thanks a million for our panelists. We appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
I'd like to just repeat that. Thank you so much to Rainier and Mike and Jeff and your respective organizations for giving us the time and your expertise. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Great. Thank you.
Bye.